Well, good morning and welcome into another episode of the Mad Monday podcast, brought to you by 4 and 20 Pies, the perfect at-home snack for watching rugby league. And I think the snacks took an absolute hammering yesterday afternoon. My name is Tino Whaasua Manaia, and I'm joined by Tohu Hurley. Is that where we landed on that?
We start almost every podcast with which one are we? Which one are you? I think Hurley Farnworth is quite popular.
Yeah, Hurley Farnworth back from injury and live from the Bay of Plenty as well. Where did you watch that game yesterday, Ben?
I watched it at home while I was cooking Mother's Day dinner rather, and I must admit my attention waned somewhat. I mean, better than if I'd have tuned in 12 minutes late. I was thinking sometimes I mistime things. I occasionally miss the start of a game, and imagine that you just switch on the TV and it's already 22-0.
Yeah, we talked about this. If you just tuned in at half-time, you would have been like, 22-0, okay, bad, but not that bad. But if you watch the way that it happened, in the first 14 minutes, there were late scratchings before the game actually started. So RTS out with the hammy, but before he was even ruled out with a hammy, Webby was intending to move him to the wing, so they had already dropped Marcelo Montoya back down to New South Wales Cup. Marcelo said, well, don't bother putting me on the bench. I'd rather go and play, rather than just sitting in the sheds for a whole game. Then RTS does his hammy. Now all of a sudden you've got a left edge of Ed Cossey and Adam Pompey, both capable players in their own right, but haven't played much this season. In fact, Ed Cossey not at all. And that's exactly what happened. Am I simplifying it a bit much, that first 14 minutes with that inexperienced left edge?
Oh, no, I think you've got a point. I mean, perhaps there were bigger problems across the park, but the fact that we didn't touch the ball for almost that entire time, and unfortunately, the Cossey club, he looked a little out of his depth early doors. Yeah,
he did go on to score a try, which I think, there wasn't a lot of chahooing about that one when he did score it. He almost looked apologetic, but after that first 22 minutes, 22 points in the first 14 minutes, the Warriors sort of got into a bit of an arm wrestle with the Roosters. And I thought for long stretches we looked okay. We looked okay on attack. We had a few different options. Tamari Martin was getting his little chipping game going. He was taking it to the line. And then we'd knock the ball on and they would score almost immediately. It was it was quite comprehensive, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think that try, the Tupou try, it was off a really nice bit of play. Tamari Martin chips into the corner. Tedesco has no option but to take it over the sideline. And then, as soon as we get the ball back, knock on and they score at the other end. Like it was a heartbreaker. I mean, at that point, I don't think anyone thought that we were going to be winning that game. No. But maybe putting some respectability into the scoreline at that point. Look, I know you like to work backwards from where the problems are. And if you don't count the first 13 minutes of that game, it is 18-16. The question you got to ask yourself, do teams take their foot off the throttle and go, you know what, let's not get injured. Let's not have any more list to the casualty ward. After that.
Yeah, you're so right, because even if I did try and do my NRL maths on this one, I still couldn't get the sheet to balance. It was still comprehensive. Like you said, the only way to do it would be bin that first 14 minutes, and even then, it's still a tough one. But you can't bin those first 14 minutes because they were so comprehensive, and it was every time they touched the ball as well. They were carving off meters at will. You raised a good point about trying to get out of there without injuries. It was almost, it couldn't have gone any much worse for the Warriors. Of course, RTS out, as I said before the game even started. And then Sean Johnson falls victim to a chicken wing, and he tried to tough it out, but he eventually succumbed to the injury. On top of that, Bunty Afoa, who came back on in the last couple of minutes, you would have noticed his jersey was bright white, and that's because he sustained a shoulder injury in the first half and spent most of the game on the bench. So you're right. They were trying to get out with the fewest injuries they managed to, and unfortunately for us, the injury ward now looks ridiculous. Don't know when we'll see Sean Johnson next.
So I know we'll probably get more into this, but what is the difference between last season and this season? And to me, it's not heaps. Like, there are just periods of the game where we fall off. Unfortunately, this one was that we decided not to start the game until, the second quarter. But is it, and again, this is oversimplifying it, is it literally that Sean Johnson has a niggle, and it's not the pec, it's something else, and that he's not being the inspired player that he was last year? He's not running at the line. It is almost Johnson of him going to the Sharks, right?
Yeah, I did say this last week. I felt like the difference going into this game had been that last year he was the best player in the NRL, and then this year he's a good halfback, maybe even a great halfback, but he's not the best player, like the hands down best player in the NRL like he was last year, which is hard to do. And it could be as easy as that. Obviously, the injuries are a part of it. I do think confidence is a big thing as well. I thought that last year the wins snowballed, and this year I feel like the losses are doing the same. But I just think that it's just this. You're right; they're not far off. There's not any personnel change, I think, that's needed in that team massively outside of the injury stuff. It's just if you're a fraction off the pace, then that's not good enough to be a top 4 team anymore. And the Warriors aren't.
Let's talk about sliding doors for a second. And by that, I mean, I think we should get Gwyneth Paltrow in on the wing. No, the movie Sliding Doors, is there a different reality, a different present day if Xavier Coates doesn't dot down that try in Game 2 versus the Storm? Imagine we knock the Storm off Game 2 of the season.
Yeah.
And you talk about confidence. That is a huge confidence boost for the rest of the season to do that. Unfortunately, the Storm come back and beat the Warriors in the last second. So for me, that's a sliding doors moment.
I think that's huge from you. I think you did right, because that one hurt a lot for Warriors fans. It was the manner in which they did it. Last minute, he DWZ, and then all of a sudden everyone's, well, geez, are we this team again? I'm just looking at where would we be on the table? We'd probably be 12th if it was just that game in isolation, but you're right, it's what that game does for the team.
See, I think we beat the Storm, we don't lose to the Dragons, we don't lose to the Titans.
Yeah, or even the Seagulls game was after the Storm, wasn't it? I think that's a win.
Yeah,
we should have won that one.
But that was a draw that felt like a win, right?
Yeah.
And the Seagulls are pretty good this year, and that's actually worth saying as well. The Roosters are the high flying team in the competition at the moment.
Yeah.
They were terrible last year by their own standards. This year I mean, for me, it's them or the Sharks or the Storm. Like, they're going to take out this competition, and I put them all three of them ahead of Penrith.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I think that you're right, and I mentioned it on the commentary that their pendulum is massively swinging up at the moment. We talked, everyone's been talking about 100 points in the last 2 games before they played us, and then for us, 3-game losing streak. So it's almost as if our graphs are intersecting. They are massively on the way up. Warriors fans, might be on the way down at the moment.
Yeah.
And so we caught each other at just the perfect worst time. One silver lining is that we didn't concede as many points as the last 2 teams that did lose to them, one of them being the Broncos. So, we can sort of take a bit of solace away from that. And the old adage that no one wins the comp after having 50 hung on them, they only got to 38. These are the silver linings I'm desperately trying to claim.
Yeah. I mean, look, I love Sean Johnson. How can you not love a Sean Johnson, right? But an injured Sean Johnson who isn't playing like he was last year, carrying him is, I don't think, doing the team any favors. So is this injury, if he's going to have a few weeks out with this pec injury, is that the worst thing in the world that we have Chanel Harris-Tavita and Tamari Martin in the halves?
Well, if Chanel's ready, I don't. He's still out. It's going to be interesting. Somebody mentioned this a while ago when they first started talking about the Achilles thing in the old Mad Monday Munters group on Facebook. They were saying if Sean Johnson gets injured or is rested, who are our halves? And at that stage,
Well, it's probably Dylan Walker, actually.
It is.
Yeah.
I know.
I think Tamati goes into halfback and Dylan Walker goes into 6, right?
Yeah, I think it is. And I got to be honest with you, I'm happy enough with that because he's looked great, Dylan Walker, for us.
Yeah, he really has.
Yeah, he whenever he comes on, it's an instant bit of fizz. You can see him pointing, and even if he wasn't being effective, just the fact that someone's trying to organise something, trying to create something that, as a Warriors fan, watching them lose, you can at least be like, are they having a crack, Dylan
He's
Walker's
got some mana.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Sean Johnson doesn't have mana, but there's something kind of, there's a quiet confidence in Dylan Walker that I really love.
Yeah, and, a capable half in his own right as well. He's actually doing all right in fantasy Supercoach points too.
Yeah, he is. Oh, by the way, speaking of Supercoach, I'm having that was a miserable round of rugby league for me. The Warriors get hammered. The Cowboys lose. They're my other team. And I started Supercoach with a hiss and a roar this year, and I think I've lost 3 in a row. So, I've got to keep the faith in the whole game, to be honest, because at points during the weekend, I almost watched Super Rugby.
You would have been forgiven for doing it too. It was one of the better weekends of Super Rugby. But you've got to keep the faith in your own team because you've burned all your trade boosts as well, haven't you?
I've got one left.
Oh, you got one left, yeah.
I got one left. But I've carried... I took on our producer, Athan Pumana, this week, and I think I beat him last time, but I certainly did not beat him this time.
Yeah, she's a fickle mistress. It's honestly a wasteland out there, and we're going to talk about it very shortly about all of the injuries that have happened to star players because we're coming into the origin period now. There's going to be so many that aren't in for their respective representative franchises. But I would have to say, despite all of the terrible things that happened in that game on the weekend, if we're looking at who had a good performance, I thought Tamati Martin looked better on attack. We talked about it before. And Mitch Barnett, he has to be playing Origin this year, surely. He looked outstanding. A couple of knock-ons, I'll give you that. But other than that, he was into everything. And when we were struggling to get go forward, he put his hand up every time.
Yeah, I agree. He's got a big heart. I think maybe a defensive lapse in that first 13 minutes as well. But yeah, handling is his biggest weakness. But you can't take away from the guy's heart. Just before we move on, just one last point I wanted to make. I've been watching Welcome to Wrexham, the new series.
Yeah,
and there's something about Phil Parkinson, who is if you've seen the series, he's the coach, and he goes hammer and tongs with the speeches. He does not hold back. I feel like he's like a Craig Bellamy type, or maybe a Sticky. And whereas I think Webby, as much as I love him, he's more of a Ted Lasso, keep it chilled. And maybe we don't need that. Maybe he needs to rev the boys up so that they go out ready, because it is these slow starts and these periods, either side, the start of the first half or the start of the second half, where we tend to be losing games. So maybe he needs to rev the boys up a little bit more.
Yeah, or does he need an assistant who can take that role on so he can still stay in that sort of Yoda role where he's, not offside with the boys? Because I can't imagine it's Stacey, No,
it's not going to be Stacey.
Anytime you've got a guy rolling what I'm sure was just a cigarette in the coach's booth, he's not the kind of guy who's going to go in and tear strips off dudes.
So it's a good cop, bad cop is what you're talking about, really. And
we need a bad cop in there. I don't know who it is.
We need a bad cop.
But maybe we do need a bad cop in there. Do you subscribe to the theory that the Warriors have been reading their own press this year and have thought that it was going to come a little bit too easily, and maybe that's why they've left off the accelerator a little bit?
No, not at all. But I remember talking to you before game one and saying every time we looked like an amazing team on paper, we have a terrible season. And you went, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I remember having the same conversation. You were like, are you a little bit terrified about this season? I was like,
yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it's all coming to fruition. So maybe it's us. If we're going to talk about curses and, magical thinking, maybe it's actually you and me and not these Pinot Noirs.
Yeah. Matt Heath came onto the Agenda podcast this morning, available where all good podcasts are sold, to defend himself and the Pinot Noirs. and he ended up storming out of the studio in another ACC world first. So go and listen to the first sort of 10, 15 minutes of that one. Treat yourself.
Well, he's coming off a massive red wine hangover from yesterday. That's the issue.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. I accused him and more broadly the Pinot Noirs, all four of them, of being fans, of not being fans of the Warriors, but rather of being fans of themselves, because all they talk about is themselves and share photos of their own faces.
And that wound him up? Oh, I can't see why.
And he decided to walk out. So look, send us through your feedback on the old voicemail function. Let us know what side of the ledger you sit on that one. Anything else you wanted to say about the Warriors? Do we just draw a line under this one?
Draw a line under this one and just hope for a miracle against Penrith next weekend.
Yeah, and I would say it's a long season. I keep saying this is me trying to convince myself, but it is a long season, and there's plenty to happen between now and the end of the year, so don't lose the faith. And we also said, me and Di were talking about on the commentary, that the bandwagon is, it actually has, it's like a roller coaster at Rainbow's End, where the thing comes over the top of your shoulders and locks you in. If you jumped on at some point last year, you're in for the long haul.
Yeah, welcome to what it means to be a Warriors fan.
Yeah, the ups and the downs. Hey, the 4 pack prize pack is back every month. We got 4 tickets to the next home game, which annoyingly is Magic Round this weekend. That's technically our home game against the Panthers at Suncorp. We don't have tickets to that, I'm sorry. The next legit home game, if you want to win tickets to that, just text EAT to 3236 to be in to win, all thanks to our great mates at 4 and 20. We're going to take a quick break, come back with the Stonka of the round. All right, we've drawn a line underneath the Warriors game, and now it is time for the Stonka of the round. And it had to be the Storm versus the Sharks, 18-25 in the end. Hurley, this game was one of those games where I was struggling to stay awake, and I actually ended up going to bed, woke up to go to the loo at about 2 in the morning, checked the score, I was like, what? What happened? Had to go back and watch the end of it. This was a Stonka, wasn't it?
It was an absolute stonker, and I mean, it's probably a bit basic to choose this one because it was definitely the kind of headline game of the round for the NRL, but it didn't disappoint, and there was a bit of drama as well. Nicho Hines was ruled out just before the game, sending pretty much everybody except me, super coach, into an absolute spin because everybody seems to have him except me. And you know what? The Sharks did not. Well, maybe they did miss him. Maybe they would have put 20 on the Storm with him. But they look like a very, very good side this year. The Sharks, obviously, the Storm are always good, but the Sharks going hard. The other bit of controversy, of course, was Harry Grant getting sent off for contact with the leg. He had absolutely no intention of touching the leg of the kicker. And that new rule, they are very, very black and white about it.
Yeah, he wasn't even looking at him. He was looking the other way. And it was just incidental contact with the hip, and not to bring up the Warriors again, but the same thing happened to Dylan Walker and nothing came of it. To be fair, Dylan Walker did kick. I think it was Sam Walker. But I just thought that one was ridiculous. Social media fired up as soon as it happened as well. Obviously, all of the pundits across the ditch are weighing in heavily on it. And if that's going to be the rule, then it has to be the same for absolutely everyone. I thought that I did not see the Sharks winning this one at all. Braden Trindle is out for them. He looked quite good. Obviously, Nicho Hines is the heart and soul of that team. He was out as well. And I thought for all money, there's no way the Sharks are going to win this. Sure, the Storm had a few dudes out as well. Obviously, Pappenhausen and Jerome Hughes. But capable replacements in Tyron Wishart, who looked excellent, scored a try, and Sua Fa'alongo, who's the darling of the NRL at the moment. Where the hell do the Melbourne Storm find all these guys?
Queensland.
And
I think they just drive around rural Queensland and entice young players into a Melbourne Storm van with lollies, and then they make the 3-day trip back to Melbourne.
It just seems every time someone goes down, we saw it with Nicho Hines when he came in for Ryan Pappenhausen a few years ago, then all of a sudden he becomes, a star, then he goes down. Now Nick Minute comes in, now he's a bloody star. It's like, God, some of these teams, them and the Roosters, which we'll get to later on. The other takeaway, the big takeaway I had from this, and I know this is beaten dog syndrome from being a Warriors fan again, Ali Katoa looks absolutely electric for the Storm. Every time he touches the ball, he looks like something's going to happen, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's so much depth in both those teams. You know, they had Gerard Hughes out, the Storm, as you say, Pappenhausen, and it's just like they just lost nothing. And you know, we've got an injured Sean Johnson in our team every single week because we don't feel like we've got a decent replacement. And the Storm just, I don't know whether. They just keep coming, don't they?
Yeah, they do. But yeah, we could certainly do with Ali Katoa back on the Warriors roster. I mean, but the other thing is, would he have become this Ali Katoa if he had stayed at the Warriors? Potentially not. Yeah, you mentioned Hughes out, Wishart, and he looked great. Munster looked just like Munster always does.
Yeah.
But Talakai...
Just such a troublemaker, isn't he, Munster?
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder if he'll play his entire career at the Storm, because he would be... I could see another, glory team trying to poach him. He would go for potentially record money, I reckon.
He would, but I feel like he could also potentially tank a team if he was to go. Like if he went to the Roosters, I just don't feel like it would fit. Obviously, he's one of the best players in the comp, but he's just such a larrikin. I just feel like they wouldn't take...
I don't see him going to the Roosters. Maybe the Broncos or the Cowboys would be a good fit for him, I think, potentially.
Yeah, I could see that. Talakai ended up sealing the deal for that one. The much maligned Sifa Talakai, who had a barnstorming game. Was it last year? May have even been the year before, and then has since been relegated to the bench, but came on in that second half and sealed the deal off a Mulitalo pass. So up and down for that guy, Talakai.
Yeah, I mean, he had that disastrous Origin debut, and I think, again, like talk about sliding doors, I think that ruined him for like 2 seasons.
Yeah, I think so too, because he had the one game against the Manly Sea Eagles that Morgan Harper still wakes up in a cold sweat about every other week, and then all of a sudden everyone's saying, oh, he's the next big thing. And, you got to bear in mind a couple of months before that, I think he was picking up rubbish bags off the back of a truck, and then to turn around, it's just all up and down. He ended up winning that game. They took a preemptive drop goal early doors at about 8. I think they went up 19-18 at one point, did the Sharks, and they ended up sealing that one. It was a great game. As I said, gutted that I fell asleep for the finish of that one. Had to get up and watch that one early doors the next day. But, that was the Stonka of the round. Just a couple of other things to whip around. We've talked about Hines' hammy. The injuries that are racking up coming into this Origin period, obviously Hines... Turbo did his hammy in the Manly Sea Eagles game as well. It's just another hammy for Turbo. It's probably going to be, I don't know, they were saying like 6-7 weeks for Turbo now with that one. Heartbreaking stuff for Manly. And then Cleary with another aggravation of his hammy as well. He could be out for a while too. So massive injuries on top of Pappenhausen a couple of weeks ago. On top of the fact that everyone's super coaches in tatters, Origins in tatters, your own team that you support as well. I don't know. Is there something going on, do you think, or is this just a...
Is this just a symptom of the very, very fast, hard game that they play now? I think it's been talked about a lot. The set restart is potentially just... I mean, it makes the game so good to watch. I think you said it a couple of weeks ago, watching rugby union is just like watching league on slow motion, and it makes the game so good to watch. But is it pushing the players too hard?
Yeah, I think it's the 6 again of it all. They don't get any rest. They're out on their feet. Oh, the Warriors are out on their feet here, but they just I don't know. I'd love to see the stats and see if there's a correlation between more injuries and the faster play of the game. Speaking of injuries, our dear friend Tavita Pangai Jr. has made his foray into the boxing world. You remember a shock retirement last year from the National Rugby League. He was knocked out in 69 seconds. So he has retired from all forms of boxing. This is his second retirement in as many calendar years. And the stories are that he had been talking to the Melbourne Storm about potentially a return to NRL, and they said, thanks, but you're not in playing shape, so we won't have you. What do you make of this? Yeah.
If he comes back to rugby league, do you just like niggle him until he snaps and get into a fight, and then you know he's got a glass jaw, so you put him out?
Yeah, as he lost a bit of money when he walks back out onto the field. Why is it that he was talking to the Melbourne Storm? Why is it always two teams that can find the salary cap to bring in a dude who, it was a bizarre...
Roosters or Storm, right?
Roosters or Storm. It was a bizarre exit that he had, and now he's trying to make his way back. And the Melbourne Storm have come out publicly and said that they don't want him. I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked to see him on one of these rosters very, very soon. You talk about the Melbourne Storm and the Sydney City Roosters. We haven't had a chance to talk about it on this podcast, but David Fafita has just signed with the Sydney City Roosters for next year, and the rich get richer. This doesn't pass the sniff test. Whenever I hear that the Sydney City Roosters have signed another big name, it's a little easier to explain away this year because you've got Luke Keary announcing his retirement at the end of the year. You've also got Joey Manu, who's going to leave and head over to rugby union, and then Angus Crichton I don't think has an extension beyond this season at this stage. So there may well actually be enough money under the salary cap. But every time
Joey Manu's a big... I mean, he's done quite a lot of money, I think.
Yeah. But every time you hear about these, you're just like, how are you guys fitting this in?
Yeah, he's going from Gold Coast to the eastern suburbs of Sydney. Like, they're both quite nice places to live.
Yeah.
I think once you've been on the Gold Coast, you're not going to want to sign for the Raiders.
Or the Warriors.
Potentially all the Warriors. I didn't want to say that.
Well, I mean, there were rumours swirling around on social media last week that he was in talks with the Warriors. This always happens when someone's in talks with various clubs. They contact the Warriors to try and drive their price up.
But you know who took that bait? Chris Key. It was all over the radio with it.
Yeah, that was the source that I saw. So you've got to take that with a grain of salt as well. But yeah, he has signed with the Roosters for next year. He has rounded back into form after a tough start to the season, out with injury. He's now back to being the David Fafita that we all knew and loved having in our fantasy teams. So, God, the rich just get richer again, don't they? Those bloody Roosters.
Yeah, how do you think James Fisher-Harris is feeling coming to the Warriors next year based on this season? Do you think he thinks he might be the great hope? Or he's like, oh, what have I done?
Is he going to backflip as well? Do you reckon?
Yeah.
Pull out of it?
I hope not.
Oh, God. I hope not as well. All right, let's take one more quick break here. And then when we come back, let's get back into a bit of Hurley's Heroes.
Oh, welcome to Hurley's Heroes. It is a guessing game where I give a little bit of information about a player from yesteryear, and whoever my co-host is has to guess which one it is, given a list of options. And because we are playing Penrith this year, we are facing off against just the great, the one that got away, Ivan Cleary. I always thought of Ivan Cleary as a player who played for a lot of clubs. Based on my research, though, it's not that many. 4 clubs. He played for 4 clubs. Played for Manly. He played for Penrith, obviously. He played for the Warriors, and he played for the Roosters. He also had a coaching stint with the Tigers. So I guess involved with 5 clubs. So today's theme is about a player who played for 7 NRL clubs. Now, there's only 3 players that have played for 7 NRL clubs, but this particular person started his career for Souths, where he played 4 seasons. Then 9 games for the Cowboys, 2 games for the Hunter Mariners, who I think they were only around for 1 season, 10 for the Warriors, 16 for the Balmain Tigers, and then 42 for the West Tigers, including the famous snow game where a freak snowstorm hit during an away game at Canberra and they played in the snow. He must have loved playing league in the snow because he then moved to Canberra where he played 57 games for the Raiders until retirement. He also played 10 tests. I'm not going to say who for. Here's a piece of information that might help. My son is a current NRL player.
Oh.
Am I Kevin Campion? Am I Blake Green? Am I Branko Lee? Am I Tyron Smith? Or am I Lee Odenryan?
This is obviously a while ago, this player. So it can't be Branko Lee because I think at the start of this season he was on a NRL team, unless he had a son when he was 3.
You never know with these league players.
Yeah. Lee Odenryan has never been one of the answers, despite
imagine if this was the one that I used.
Despite every week being one of the options. And also the URL for our Facebook group, Odenryan. Can I have the first 3 again? One of them was Campion. I'm gonna rule Campo out because he played more than 10 games for the Warriors.
Okay, Blake Green is the second one.
Too young.
Branko Lee, Tyron Smith, or Lee Odenryan.
Can I lock in by process of elimination Tyron Smith? Was that his name?
That is correct. And can you tell me who his son is? For an extra point.
Remus Smith.
Ding, ding, ding. Hey! 2 points to you, sir. Well done.
Oh, that was a brutal process of elimination. I didn't know the answer. I just had to sort of whittle them down until I got to the right one. I still don't even know who that is. I got to be honest with you. It was a bit before my time, but
yeah, he's a Kiwi. Played 10 tests for New Zealand and 3 for the Māori team as well. His son, and he's also, another bit of information, he is Anthony Mundine's brother-in-law. He married Anthony Mundine's sister.
Small world.
Yeah.
Small world. What a hectic Christmas that must be. That would be out the absolute gate. All right, that'll do us for the podcast for today. Hurley, our dear friend Chris Key, Minogue and Hoyt from The Big Show are heading over to Magic Round this weekend. They're heading over on Friday. God, how jealous are you of that trip?
Oh, I mean, as much to just see what Jason Hoyt's going to do.
Yeah.
There should be a documentary crew following him, really.
Yeah, well, I've actually personally funded a documentary crew to head over there, but not to follow Jason Hoyt, because the notorious pantsman Joel Harrison has paid for his own ticket over there. He has no tickets to the game. He has no accommodation, and he just wants to go over there and basically punish players throughout the whole weekend. So I've sent over a film crew to follow Joel Harrison around, and that's the footage I want to see.
Well, there'll definitely be a shot of him spooning Marcelo Montoya at some point.
100%. All right, that'll do us for today's episode of the Agenda Podcast. We'll try and get Keezy on Thursday on the eve of him heading over to the Caxton Street party ahead of Magic Round. Thank you very much, Hurley.
Thanks, mate.
Keep the faith.
An Australia without rugby league. An Australia without rugby league is not Australia.